Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsey Moppert here, joined by Kris Baker, a Sabres prospect analyst. We're going to be talking a little bit about the 2024 NHL draft, which is coming up in a little over a week now, June 28th and June 29th, down in Las Vegas. The Sabres have the 11th overall pick. And as we've discussed before, the draft can always be very unpredictable, right? Especially this year after the first pick, San Jose kind of already saying that they're expecting to take Macklin Celebrini. So I guess a very general question here for you, Kris. What is the most ideal situation for the Sabres at this year's NHL draft?
Well, Lindsey, the Sabres have had their scouting meetings right now. They rank their players, they build their big board. And I think the ideal situation in a nutshell is to have a player that they have ranked maybe 6, 7, or 8 fall to them at the 11th spot. And that's actually something that could happen this year. You mentioned the word unpredictable. You mentioned Celebrini going first overall to San Jose this year. And I do believe that after Celebrini, no one knows what's going to happen at number 2 and beyond. So I think it's reasonable to suggest that the Sabres could have someone very highly rated that could fall to them at 11. And if you go back just a year ago, leading up to the draft, we all talked about Zach Benson as being a guy that maybe was in the 7, 8, 9 range. No one thought that the Buffalo Sabres were going to be able to select Zach Benson at 13. Lo and behold, that's what happened. So you can read all the mock drafts in the world and you can think you know how it's going to go. You never know how the draft is going to shake out until the picks start firing away. And I think, the other thing to remember too is that this is going to be a best player available situation for the Sabres. You're not going to be filling any top club needs. That's what trades and free agency are for. You're drafting for the future. If you go back just a couple years, Lindsey, the Sabres had 3 picks in the first round with Matthew Savoy and Noah Ostlund and Yuri Kulik. That was a couple years ago. You have a combined, I think, less than 20 minutes combined of those 3 players in NHL experience right now here in the summer of 2024. So all the more reason why you're drafting for the future and you're not drafting for the now.
And we're going to get into the Sabres prospect pool because obviously that's a big part of the draft and they have one of the strongest ones in the NHL. But just generally, is there a forward or a defenseman specifically on your mind that you feel like could be there at 11 and would be a good fit for the Sabres?
Yeah, I think the ideal scenario would be for the Sabres to have a shot at drafting Tij Iginla, who's a 6 foot, 190 plus pound winger. He can play center also. So this is a kid who scored 47 goals last year for the Kelowna Rockets in the Western League. We've seen the Sabres have success going to the Western Hockey League in recent years, whether it's Dylan Cousins, Zach Benson. They acquired Bowen Byram recently. He was a Western Hockey League product. There's a little bit of a flavor developing there with this young group of Buffalo Sabres, both professionals and prospects. But I love Iginla's game. He's a great shooter. He's probably one of the top 2 or 3 shooters in this draft class. Like I mentioned, 47 goals last year. He didn't do that by mistake. He knows what to do when he gets the puck. He has a hard, heavy game to him. He's got some grit. If you look at what the Sabres need, now I mentioned before, you're not filling holes for the now, but we saw this Sabres team at the NHL level last year. Maybe they could have afforded to have more grit and attitude and a heaviness to their game on the forecheck. Iginla does that. I think they can really afford to add that element to their prospect ranks. And look, this is a kid, like I mentioned, his shot, he can do it off the rush. He can get to the net. And here's another little cool nugget with Iginla. If that name sounds familiar, he is the son of Jarome Iginla, right? A Hockey Hall of Famer. Jarome Iginla in 1995 was drafted 11th overall. So maybe history repeats itself. It'd be a cool little storyline to follow on draft night.
You know what? And it's funny that you bring up Tej because at the combine, I was there and he had one of the best interviews. We all know the funny punchlines of teams asking them, what animal would you be on and off the ice? And Tej's response, I think he said, a Pegasus. And he was like, honestly, I came up with it on the spot. It got a lot of love on Twitter or X. And so it is funny that you bring him up and you make a lot of great points. Now, something I want to mention kind of going into the prospect aspect of all of this is just the fact that you keep bringing up the now, right? And Lindy Ruff, Kevin Adams, all of them talk about the now because, I mean, obviously you need to focus there if you have a 13-year playoff drought, but do you feel like making a pick in this year's draft is, I mean, you kind of alluded to it, but it's not focusing on the now, if that makes sense. Like a lot of people are kind of hoping that they trade this pick. And if you trade it versus if you take it, you're not really focused on the now, I guess.
Every player, every prospect, every draft pick is currency. And the ultimate goal is to make the playoffs and win the Stanley Cup. So with that said, I mean, I'm all for if a deal presents itself where the Buffalo Sabres can become a better team now, and I'm banging my desk as I say this to you, you seriously consider making that trade. It's currency. I think that the 11th overall pick is a valuable piece of currency that Kevin Adams has in his wallet right now. And no, so it's totally in play. At the same time, we have to remember that in the grand scheme of things in the NHL, Buffalo has historically been a market that you have to draft and develop and promote from within. The Sabres just happen to have a really nice wallet full of prospects right now, given how well they've drafted in recent years. They could afford to move that 11th pick if the right deal comes along. I'm all for it.
Now, Kris, do you feel like, we may be all for it and fans may be all for it, but do you actually think this is maybe something Adams and Lindy Ruff that they would actually do and consider? I know he has talked about it a couple times on some different platforms and things, but do you feel like, I mean, Kevin Adams is also known to always make his pick. I think I forget how many prospects he's had in the past couple of years, first round picks. But he is kind of known to do that.
Look, I think that if you look at the Sabres roster right now, you're not just trading the pick to trade the pick. The right deal has to come along. If you need a centerman to fill that gap that was created when you traded Casey Middlestat, you make a move. If the right deal comes along, there's a couple players, I could sit here and speculate and throw names out there, but I'll throw a couple out there if you want me to, just for the fun of it. If a player of the caliber of a Brady Tkachuk becomes available, you put that 11 and more in play all day long. Even on a lesser scale, if Tampa gets themselves in a little bit of trouble once they have to sign Steven Stamkos and they have to move an Anthony Cirelli, a player that's been there and done that, that has playoff experience, that can fill a role and a need on your top club lineup, you make that move all day long. And we don't know if they're going to make that deal until we know what's available in the trade market. Now, again, I don't want to say, oh, Anthony Cirelli's available. I don't think that. But if some miracle happens, that's a move that you strongly consider. And that's not one of those elite all-star type of names that you might be thinking about all the time, but he'd be a heck of a player for the Buffalo Sabres to get in terms of a middle of the lineup centerman, penalty killer, and has a little bit of offensive juice to him as well. I would trade 11.
That's why I think it's funny when people, as you were saying, I don't want to just sit here and throw out names and guesses and this and that because you really don't know. Again, going back to the word predictable, nobody knows what's going on behind closed doors and maybe what deal was there, or maybe if they make the pick and fans are upset that they didn't trade it, people are wondering why didn't they? As you said, maybe just the right deal was not there and they're investing in the future, which we know Kevin Adams is. So kind of going, just because, I have you here with me, looking at the Sabres prospects specifically, I just want to pick your brain here. Which prospect right now do you feel like looking to next season could have an impact up here in Buffalo with the Sabres?
It's going to be interesting. I think this training camp is going to be one that's going to see some younger players really battle. Now, we don't know what's going to happen in free agency. We don't know how many openings that there's going to be at the end of the day once Kevin Adams fills out his lineup with free agent acquisitions and maybe some trades, perhaps, or perhaps not. But I think, Yuri Kulik really developed nicely last year in Rochester. He just turned 20, by the way. Let's not forget how young he still is. So if he doesn't make the team, let's not lose our minds here, okay? Because he still has some developing that he can do. But he took great strides last year in terms of Seth Appert, when he was coaching the Amerks last year, he could put him out there late in games to take defensive zone draws. He could give him more even strength assignments against the opposition's top line. And he was doing it as a centerman. That's important to note because he has a lot more responsibility playing in the middle of the ice than he does going up and down a wing. I think Kulik's in the hopper there for a guy that could push for a job. We know he can score goals. And sometimes just getting the right chemistry with a guy could really see him pop in preseason. So I'm kind of curious to see what he does. Matthew Savoy is going to be an interesting one. He's had really strong junior career. He has that speed that the Sabres could really afford to add to their lineup. He just doesn't have the experience right now. But a dynamic scoring forward. I think there's a lot to like there. Let's see what he does. You got to remember too, when Savoy went down to Rochester on his conditioning assignment last year, he scored 5 points in 6 games. He just kind of jumped right into pro hockey and did fairly well. He's a guy with another offseason of strength training and coming in a little more sturdy because he's got a high compete level. He's not afraid. He's not allergic to contact. If he has a little bit more thickness to his frame and can survive some of those battles on the walls and in the corners, he's a guy that can maybe pop too. The other guy I want to throw out there, Lindsey, is Isak Rosén. He's another player. I should have handcuffed him to Kulik in this discussion, but they were line mates all year. I think that he's just sneaky good defensively. He really became a 200-foot player last year. He's got speed. He can kill penalties. If there's an opening maybe on like your third line, he's a guy that could really fit in well there. Again, let's see. You saw him get bigger. He came in. I don't want to say that Isak Rosén was wayfish by any means when he first got to Rochester, but he's much thicker. He looks more like a man now. And that's another thing that we have to remember too. If you look at some of these young guys when they're 18, 19, you look at them when they're 23, 24, they look radically different. You're seeing that transformation with an Isak Rosén right now. So he's another guy. He can come in and really impress. The skating is there. I think the smarts is there. His defensive acumen is there. I'm really curious to see what those three young players can do when they come to camp in the fall.
And one other comment that's a little off of our draft discussion that actually kind of broke today. It's no news or speculation, rather. Elliot Friedman talking about Jeff Skinner and saying how the word is out there that a Jeff Skinner buyout is a possibility. I'm not going to put you on the spot here, but do you have any comments about that or thoughts when you heard that today?
Conceptually, I haven't liked the idea of a Jeff Skinner buyout, just given some of the penalty that you're going to have. I know that there's a 1 year in there where it works to their benefit, where you get some pretty serious cap concessions, and that maybe allows you to absorb the bump that a JJ Peterka is going to get, a Jack Quinn is going to get. Maybe at that point, a Devin Levi may require. But overall, I mean, I think if you buy them out right now, what is it, 6 years that they have on the books? And you really need the cap to go up like you think it's going to go up. But I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, because if Jeff Skinner is going to go down on your third line, he becomes maybe a good matchup player on your third line. But Kevin Adams also says he wants to forge an identity in his bottom six forwards. And I'm not sure Jeff Skinner allows you to really forge that hard working, hard to play against, maybe a hard hitting identity in your bottom six forward. So it gets a little tricky. I'm conflicted, Lindsey, when it comes to it. I understand why they would do it. I'm not certain it's financially responsible because you have to keep this team in the best cap position possible. And I have to do a little more math to figure out if it's the right business move.
Right, Kris, and it's fresh. Well, it's
Yeah.
nothing. I shouldn't say it's fresh because it hasn't happened or anything. Just some talk about that today. So I thought that maybe we would bring that up and discuss it. One last thing for you, and then I will let you go. I promise on this beautiful day. If you had to, I know we've mentioned a couple of names. Again, unpredictable, but this game is always fun. If there's one player that you could pick and say, you know what, this is my prediction. I don't know. We'll have to say you get some sort of prize if you win. Coming back to this, who is the guy that you think the Sabres will get, or do you think they will trade it?
I ultimately think that they're going to make the pick. I really do. I'm for them moving it for the right decision, or the right acquisition. I think that's well established. In term, it's so hard because there's really two guys. Can I give you two? One that I think that they should take if he's there. Okay, the most prolific goal scorer in the United States national team development program history is a kid named Cole Iserman. I mentioned Tij Iginla might be the second best shooter in the class. The best shooter in the class is Cole Iserman, by far. He scores from all areas of the ice. Coming into this season, he was a consensus top 2 or 3 pick in this class. He's lost a little shine. The star has faded a little bit throughout the year, but all he's done is score goals. 58 goals in 57 games a season for the NTTP. Broke Cole Caulfield's record. It's a lot harder to teach a guy how to round out his game. Or I'm sorry, it's a lot harder to teach a guy to score than it is to get a guy to round out his game. And I think that's some of the, when you really dig into these prospects, he's been over scrutinized in my opinion. He can score. and you have to score in the NHL. So, I mean, he's a player that if he's there at 11, I think you have to take him. But overall, if I look at what the Sabres could really afford to add to their mix, there's a Norwegian kid. So Michael Brandseg Nygaard. Okay, when we talk about Savoy and Osland and Kulik and Rosane, they're all under 6 foot. Brandseg Nygaard is 6'1", 207 pounds, but he's hard hitting, hard driving, hard working, loves the forecheck, plays physical, and he has some offensive skill too. Played in Sweden's second division last year. When the stakes were raised in the playoffs, he elevated his game. He's going to be playing next year in Sweden for a great program in Skellefteå. So he's going to have a little bit more runway to grow. He's not a guy that you see in the consensus top 10 or 11, but I can see the Sabres really liking him. And he's one that would be more of, that would be a surprise pick. Yzerman's falling. I think Brandseg Nygaard is rising. One of those two guys, I'd be happy to see him taken. I could certainly rationalize the Sabres taking them.
All right, Kris. So you're going, they're going with the pick. I'm gonna guess that they're gonna trade the pick. That's a total guess, but that we're gonna have to be opposites on this one. I think many people are hoping that they trade the pick, but then again, I don't know. So, Kris, thank you again so much for joining me today. I appreciate it very, very much. We're gonna see again who is right, if either of us in that case, at the draft, the 2024 NHL draft in Las Vegas on June 28th and June 29th. But for now, I'm Lindsey Moppert here with Kris Baker. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.